iRadio means engaging with communities at a grassroots levels. Your message will resonate with listeners in various locations, fostering meaningful interactions and driving brand awareness.
Comprehensive coverage with stations in strategic locations like Reng, Malakal and Baliet. iRadio offers comprehensive coverage that reaches both urban centers and remote areas. Your partnership with iRadio ensures visibility across a wide geographic area.
Don't miss out on the opportunity to amplify your message with iRadio. Partner or advertise with us today and make your voice heard across South Sudan.
This is iRadio. When contributing to a topic on the radio, please avoid statements that may incite or promote hate. We encourage constructive points of views and criticisms that aim at providing solutions to problems facing the country. We do not want rumor mongering or information that is regarded as hearsays. We advocate for messages of peace and unity among the people of South Sudan. This is iRadio, your eye on South Sudan.
iRadio, for reliable and objective news from across South Sudan and beyond. You are listening to iRadio, bringing you programs that offer you an in-depth look at the issues that affect you. iRadio, your eye on South Sudan.
The Dawn on iRadio. Alright, a very good morning to you and welcome to the second hour of the Dawn program here on iRadio, a live broadcast from the capital, Juba. My name is Emmanuel Joseph Akile, and today is Wednesday, the 12th of November 2025, 15 minutes now after the hour of 7. Now let's talk about mental health. And South Sudan mental health crisis is likely invisible but widespread. Decades of conflict, displacement, poverty and hunger have left deep psychological wounds, and instability continues to disrupt what few services exist. Now, survivors of sexual and gender-based violence are especially vulnerable, often lacking access to both mental health and also legal support. So it caught up with one of the organizations working hard to address or help people who are mentally disturbed. That is Doctors Without Borders or Medicine Sans Frontiers, which continues to offer follow-up care in prison and across the community, including counseling, mediation, and also awareness sessions for health workers and families. So last month, MSF shared an important article detailing the severe and also often invisible mental health crisis in South Sudan. I caught up with Mr. Monjok Monlong, who is the MSF mental health supervisor in Malakal town of Upper Nile State, and this is what he had to say.
South Sudan faces serious but often overlooked mental health crisis. Years of conflict, displacement, food insecurity, and loss of livelihood have led deep emotion and psychological scars. Many people continue to live with depression, anxiety, trauma, and post-traumatic stress. The crisis is worsened by crowded and insecurity, living conditions in camp and communities, as well as ongoing instability and poverty. Cases of suicide and self-harm has been reported more frequently. Despite this need, access to mental health and psychosocial support remain extremely limited due to shortage of qualified professionals and inadequate healthcare infrastructure.
Can you tell us what are the most common mental health issues that the organization or MSF encounters among patients?
Most of them are depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, substance use, and psychosomatic complaint where where emotional distress manifests as a physical symptom. We also see adolescents with behavioral change, adults struggling with grief and loss, and survivors of violence who experience flashbacks, nightmares, or sometimes isolation. Many of these conditions are untreated due to stigma and lack of awareness in the community.
And I understand some parts of the country are actually experiencing conflict. So how has the ongoing conflict, for instance, let's say, in Upper Nile, for instance, and displacement also affected the mental health of communities?
Conflict and displacement are devastating psychological effects. Many people witness violence, loss of loved ones, and being uprooted from their home. Families are being separated, and many are still living in camps where life is uncertain. This constant instability leads to chronic stress, depression, and hopelessness. Essentially, the mental health wound of war continue long after the fighting, even if the fighting stops. The wound continues.
Talking about the issue of conflict, so how do you often or how do you normally assess the mental health needs of people in areas that are actually experiencing crisis?
Actually, as Doctors Without Borders, we use both medical and community-based assessment. We start by talking to local leaders, workers, and affected families to understand the psychological challenge they face. Also, our team conducts mental health screening during the medical consultation and refer patients showing signs of distress to our trained counselors. We also collect data through follow-up and community visits to identify certain such as trauma, anxiety, or social isolation. Actually, this helps us create a solution that might the needs of the community affected.
Do you at some point observe differences, let's say, between rural and urban mental health needs?
Yes, for sure. You know, in the rural area, access to services is not easy, especially mental health. And in the rural area, the stigma remains strong. People often return to traditional healers or spiritual explanation for mental health issues. In some cases, families resort to extreme measures such as confining or imprisoning their loved ones because they misunderstood the symptoms of harm or fear of harm. Whereby in rural areas, whereby in an urban town, there's awareness exists. Services are there but inadequate. Urban population face stress from insecurity and poverty, whereby there's no employment. So while the root cause may differ from the both rural and urban, community needs more accessible and culturally appropriate mental health services.
Mr. Molmilan, can you also explain to us how MSF really integrates mental health care into its medical and humanitarian activities here in the country?
MSF, or Doctors Without Borders, we integrate mental health and psychosocial support directly into medical projects. For example, in our hospital, or our clinic in Malakal, we also train counselors who work alongside doctors and nurses. They can receive treatment for diseases such as chronic diseases or malnutrition, are also offer mental health support. We conduct individual, family, and group sessions as well as community awareness activities. This approach helps ensure that mental health care is not a standalone service, but part of holistic health care for the whole person. This is how we do it.
Right. And since you're a supervisor, MSF supervisor there of mental health in Malakal, can you also tell us which other regions, for instance, the Doctors Without Borders currently serve through its mental health program? So it's only in Malakal?
Yes, for sure. We, as MSF, we are operating in several parts of the country. as we are working in Malakal, we are working in Bentiu, we are working in Tweed on the side of Mayanabun, we are working in Jongle, the side of Lanken, Unity State, the side of Lair, and also in Gipa, and plus the other parts of the country like Rang, we were there. So in these areas, MSF provides both hospital-based and our mental health services. We also support people in protection of civilian sites and displaced communities where mental health needs, especially high due to conflict and insecurity.
I also would like you to tell us about the recent report of MSF, about your findings, especially with more focus specifically on these two areas, the stigmatization and also the call you made for integrating mental health care into the public healthcare system here in South Sudan.
Our findings show that stigma remains one of the biggest barriers to mental health care in the country. Many people still view mental health or mental illness as a curse or punishment, leading family to hire or abandon their loved ones or even send them to prison. This is often not of hatred, but due to lack of mental health awareness or as they attempt to protect the person or other people. You know, someone with mental health, sometimes their behaviors tend to be abnormal, whereby they may harm someone or they may harm themselves. So we recommend a strong national effort to destigmatize mental health through education, community engagement, and inclusion of mental health topics in school and health programs. Also, secondly, integration is crucial. Mental health care should also be part of the public health, from primary health care to hospital. This means training health workers, allocating resources, and also ensuring every citizen access mental health and psychosocial support as a basic right. Mental health and psychosocial support must be prioritized in South Sudan. Access to these services is essential for recovery, resilience, and overall well-being. Everyone has a role in advocating for better resources, reducing stigma, and recognizing mental health as a fundamental human right. Families and communities should also understand that people showing symptoms are not acting out of choice or intention. Therefore, awareness and care can prevent unnecessary suffering and confinement. Lastly, mental health and psychosocial support is everyone's business.
نعم ده هناك السيد منجوك منلونغ، وهو طبعا هو مشرف بتاع الصحة النفسية لمنظمة بتاع أطباء بلا حدود هناك في مدينة ملكال. وطبعا أزمة بتاع الصحة النفسية في جنوب السودان ده مبهمة إلى حد كبير، ولكنه واسع بتاع الانتشار، وخلفت عقود من الصراع والنزوح والفقر والجوع، جروحا نفسيا عميقة، وكمان لا يزال عدم الاستقرار بيعمل ما تبقى من خدمات قليلة. ويعد الناجون من العنف الجنسي والعنف القائم على النوع الاجتماعي برضو معرضين لخطر بشكل خاص، وغالبا ما يفتقروا إلى خدمات الصحة النفسية والدعم القانوني. بتواصل منظمة أطباء بلا حدود أو MSF في تقديم رعاية بتاع المتابعة في السجون وفي جميع أنحاء المجتمع، بما في ذلك الاستشارات والأدوية وجلسات التوعية للعاملين في مجال الصحة والأسر. ماذا عن رأي بتاعك وتعليق بتاعك موضوع بتاع الصحة النفسية والخدمات اللي بتقوم به MSF هناك في مدينة ملكال وفي كل أرجاء البلاد للناس اللي هم بيحتاجوا للعلاج من الأمراض النفسية؟ اتصل لنا وقدم رسالة بتاعك بعد الفاصل.
In 2025, South Sudan is writing a new chapter in its economic story. Monthly revenue collections by the South Sudan Revenue Authority have reached an impressive 130 billion South Sudanese pounds. This success is powered by digitization, a nationwide e-government program launched in 2021 that modernized public services, strengthened data systems, and made revenue collection faster, safer, and more transparent. Today, corruption leakages are shrinking, efficiency is rising, and every digital transaction moves our nation closer to stability and shared prosperity. The South Sudan Revenue Authority calls on all government bodies, development partners, and citizens to accelerate the move toward full digitization. Together, through digital transformation and cooperation, South Sudan will move forward stronger, transparent, and united for progress. South Sudan Revenue Authority, digitizing revenue, driving development.
iRadio, your eye on South Sudan. iRadio, your eye on South Sudan. iRadio.
مرحبا بك مرة ثانية مستمع راديو. ده الوقت اللي نرفع المكالمات. حلوة راديو.
Hello.
Yes.
Sultana Mama Maria.
Mama Maria, تفضلي.
Ai, yalla itaani Emmanuel. Bele de jibu halada limesia de si malian. Yalla taninde geja, umuni abe jibu le nusa teni. Yani taba nita bifakir, ita lela ita gumsaba, ita ba mulisuni. Yal taide ruwa madarasa, yal ayamin, de kulu de jibu nasiat al-kaf. Kwes, yalla je taninde, yal de silo hajat tenina le mayao. Nas kuvari jatu biga geda kalifogo. Uma bar fogala hajade de mutu. Itama bitawa losuli. Itama bisulu jaman tuwil, walita bimit. Yala leta bamula hajaje. Haja batala li nas geda kalife hajada li ma hasal yom tani. Wana maru jirubin biga deri mutu kulu bedur. Umani adair mutu bedur la anu sunu fitaninde kaman. Ita bisulu haja tazol. Ita bisulu haja tazol de. Ita maru dejara mulsuni. Sala zol de maamul haja. Kore tazol de ya jamaa ana bijede kan. Sanana bero wudile iyal tae. De nasemama asa hairana bega mapi. De kulu ruguna madera hajadu. De kulu hajada li bejibu neptek tinsi junube. Naso majanin bigo guon sukisika jatu barao. Kanita roa. Ita kandera santa beligua hajiga takalam de alita baya nugali junube jera te haja li makosle. Desu ita gumsa ba roa te msosfa hena. Yala gumsa ba roa te mkutebili. Ita baya na ajadi ya Emmanuel ya walede. Ita begulu lebe subiga kina. Ma hasal kan junub de biga jede. Yala jatu hajada li nina gamu li nufsa tanina de. Izol ma bekele ngali sala kan jan. Ita keligeni be jande. Takan ligo sala naba waide. Ita kanakulu tasuru maya. Taskuru Allah. Lakini ita utama makwe. De kulu hajada be jame ni tama. Ibe jame ni hajada li. Ita ya dakul li nufsa taki batal. Ita ninde taban. Ya uje ni isa mapi. Gurusu mapi. Ita bera sokol gurusu mapi. Gurusu take ita kutu benki. Mapi. Mobile mamu wale jena visu. Gurusu take ita kaji ni naga sandale besade. Mapi. Dekulu ya bejibu haladi.
Alright, shukran leta Mama Maria risala take kama na radio. موضوع بتاع قروش تاكي في بنك تما بقدر شيلو مو تاكي تما بقدر تلا مشاكل تا أسرة مشاكل بتاع عائلة ده كل حاجات يساهم في أمراض النفسية. Hi radio. Yes, good morning. David, welcome.
My brother, when we talk about the issue of mental health, it contributes to very many things. Poverty now is very far from it, but it's talking about the smaller things which are very close to. Like when you have liberated this country for 21 years and your child is being turned away from the school, then a soldier will ask himself, what was the reason why I was fighting for all this number of years? Somebody doesn't have a plot where to stay. In the place where he is renting, he has been turned away by the landlord. That can even make him to think too much. The rest, when your child or your wife or yourself is going to hospital, there is no medicine. You are only given an empty paper. Go and buy from the market, and you don't have money. And that one can make people to think too much. You have if you have something in the bank, and if you go and there is no cash, this will be a very big issue. You can even think too much. There are other children now who are crying that they need food, and your neighbor who is maybe a big person is having something in his house. That even can make somebody think too much. Even now the responsibility. is now being destroyed by other management. Yani pizoltani lo mara bugula wala ya baba jay nagde yal bugula baba jabishon. So asa nazakara maksule betana yala sama gad bajiri la buada shan biga ma gad jima biskuit wala ala wala kide. Ikide al maksuliyya de lazim akuna kuma betana yaraji nafsu yamul maksuliyya betadol. Maksuliyya betadol lo ma munazam al maksuliyya fi biyut gar ma bukun munazam. عشان ناس كثيرة شغالين مع حكومة بيجوا ما عندهم مسؤولية في البيوت يعني مرة ممكن دار مشاط دار قماش دار علاج يعني دار تعليم بيجوا ما دار مال كويس واجار لو بيجوا ما في المسؤولية بتاع زول يكون دوين لو زول يفكر كثير في شارع ممكن معمول حادث ممكن ذات بكون مجنون في نفس الزمن عشان هو قاعد يفكر في حاجات حياته بكون شنو هلا الواحد بشرين سنة ناس قاعد يشاكلوا عشان جنوبين كشون عشان هم يموت زيادة ولا هم يلقى حق بتومن في دولة حاجة ده يمشي بمسؤولية بتاعنا بتاع دولة ألقى كلي يعملوا مسؤولية للشعب كلي يعملوا شركات عشان ناس كثير اللي بيكون يعني ناس ده الكثير منهم ده بيجوا عشان لو ودلوا في حاجة في المستشفى بلقى زول تاني ذاته عنده ملاريا بس وياه بعملوا يكون شعب هو لو كان عنده أكل كفاية وقاعد أكله جسمه كويس الملاريا ده ذاته ما بمسوق. So this one need a full attention from our leadership of the country. That these people of South Sudan, they need services. They need the government to be a government for the people. Government which is working for all the citizens of the country. To give them food. Because what is contributing to mental health are all these negative things which are supposed to be eradicated by the government. But if they are the negative one are available, then the positive things, we are not always happy. That's why you have seen very many South Sudanese are dying very young. Some of them are taking alcohol to solve their problem. The rest, they don't stay in their houses. And people are blaming fathers. Fathers, they don't have a problem. We should have to begin from where it is until now. So we need attention from our government to look into the affairs of the country. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Attention من الحكومة. Radio. Yes, hello Radio. نواصل ونرفع المكالمات لسه في موضوع بتاع المنتل هيلث ومنظمة بتاع MSF هناك اللي اسمنا من المشرف بتاعه في مجال بتاع منتل هيلث في ملكال. راديو. صباح النور واليوم.
يلا سلام عليك. سلام لكل المستمعين. أخوي أصلا أنا بشوف الناس MSF ده خيارات كويسة إنهم قاعد يعمل ده بالنسبة لتجارة ناسنا في الدولة هنا. لأن أصلا البلد ناس كلها عايشين بالغلط. البلد عايش بالغلط جماعة ناس بيكونوا عايشين بالغلط هيزيد النفسيات ذات. شفت يعني أنا بقول لك حاجة كانت في مرة كده في سوق جوبا هناك في زول جاء بعربية واقف كده لابس كوت. جاء جاني ما شاي شرب الشاي فقال من هناك قوم قاعد ولا في السيارة بتاعه ولا السيارة ماشي وقوم ماشي بالربط الشاي سوا. أنت كيف ماشي في العربية؟ ده كله من شنو؟ ناس عايشين في الغلط ها فعشان كده الناس دي طبعا انا بشكر مسؤوليه ممكن قام زي جبال المدير بتاعهم كده قال في مرات كتير عسي وجبال انه شغالين في خدمه امراض النفسيه للناس هناك ده خير تمام يعني لناسنا لا يا
يعطيك العافيه. شكرا لمشاركتك. وده كان هناك ويليام من هي بتاع اللوجو. ماذا عنك انت؟ قدم تعليق بتاعك وبعد شويه هنيجي نسمع برضو في فقره ثانيه براو. راديو.
الو
يس
معك جيمس او كلام في جبل.
تفضل جيمس.
انا تعليقي لك يا اوكي لموضوع بتاع الناس انا كذا زي اخوي قدامي الكلام ده ده موضوع بتاع الجو يا خلى شغل أنا زمان لما كان كبرنا ما كان أخجل ما في لكن مشكلة لاتساع الدولة يا جاب المشكلة دي لأن الدولة ما قادر يوظف الناس وما قادر يفرغ الناس من هي في زمان عشان كده سوفنا ما نشوف الموضوع ده بقى عايزين خلاص وبعد كده نسكت لأنه بقى منتهي هذا درجة الشباب الخارج من الجامعة دي لكن شو كاسي حاليا يكون منتهي لأنهم شايفين نفسهم بقى ما عنده مستقبل في الدولة دي لأن زول قرأ وخرج وما لقى أي محل شغل عشان كده بقى هو يشيلوا حقوق أنا لا عشان كده لا سبب خلى شبابهم كله يتوه عشان كده أنا بقول للدولة بتاعنا لو هم لو دايرين لنا مستقبل الدولة دي كده اللي يرجع الناس نهاية في زمان عشان سنجينا استدارنا من تجي تجيب لها حلاوة بيري بكون في هذا يال بيجا بلحق أمه لأنه أمه وانسي جاسف وبيجيب له لكن أنت أبونا ما تيجي كده ولا في شغل زي ما في حاجة ده كله سبب لأنه أنت ما قاعد تيجي بحاجة تجي تجينا بيجا بكرهك والمدارس يلا لكن ساكن كلها دم الجروج لو في جروج أبو جناح في مدرسة كده هو شغل هذا اللي تنفذ ده وشغل الدكتور هو كلهم يجي قوي وكله يساعده فعلا.
شكرا كمان للمشاركة بتاعك.
iRadio for reliable and objective news from across South Sudan and beyond. Tune in to iRadio, your eye on South Sudan. iRadio for news you can rely on from across South Sudan and beyond.
ومرحبا بك مرة ثانية. نواصل ونرفع بعض من المكالمات. هلو راديو.
الو راديو.
يس.
فيليكس من النظر.
فيليكس. نعم تفضل.
زيادة حالات في بلد إيمانويل جوزيف أكيلي حاجة وادي يعني كانين نظر بيزنس تنافسي أو كنت ناس تانيين كنت تبانين لأنه أنت لو ملاحظ إنه حاجات الخاب داسة يلا سكر بالذات شباب والجيسوا أكثر نجيس تقدم حاجات وفي ناس عارفين تماما وبيزنس تنازل تتخيل حاجة زي البلد ده عنده أبوغار كتير لكن أنا ما أبوغار لقيت على من فوق ده مريسة ولقيت على من فوق شنو أصلا مريسة يوري كيس من حاجة تعقله يعني حاجة عشان بيتقبل تمام عشان بيتقبل إنه حالات ده ما بيزيدوا إنه يعني حكومة لازم هي حاجة كده وامسكوا في اتجاهه لأنه أسا حالات الشباب اللي هنا ماشيين في الشارع ده واحد بسيليشون ده في كاس ما في كده الناس في جلقاس ألو يعني بيوز حاجة حالات ده يزيدوا والسبب تأكل ما في الناس بتحالين في الشارع ده نزل كله كمان يروح دب كده أصلا ده سيدو ده حكومة يا بعمل دب كده ما مدرسة ما في ناس قاعدين أكل ما في ناس يستخدم حاجات بطل إنت قلت لي على حالة دقي أثر يعني يزيد لزيادة أنا ما أقدر بهلو من وين بس ربنا يأكل يساعد الناس.
شكرا ربنا يأكل يساعد أن نرفع مكالمتين ومنه حنيجي نسمع من أبوستوليك نونسيو بتاع فاتيكان اللي هو يتكلم في مؤتمر بتاع المطار هنا. راديو.
ما يوسف أكيله.
نعم. أنا منو؟
معك
حبيبات تفضل.
أنا بصراحة أنا عاوز أقول في نقطة بتاع موضوع بتاع الشباب الأخوات يمكن ده بسيط أو ده موجود بتاعهم الجنسية كله احنا عايشين في حالة نفسية يا أخوي مزري احنا كلنا دارين علاج فما بقى المواطنين برا حتى المسؤولين بتاعنا وكده تلقى زول هو بيكون في منصب هو بيكون يعني سيد وكده هو يعزي الناس ثانيين أو يخلي الناس ثانيين يكونوا في تعب ومشاكل ده ذاته حالة من مرض نفسي فأنا بشوف إنه الكلام ده يعني في مرات بعد الحالات اللي ذات ما مرض بمعنى إنه مرض لكن في حاجات في مطالبات تلقى المواطن ده عاوزه لو عملوا له خلاص انت تلقى هو بيرجع الحاله بتاعه السبيل بمارس حياته بطريقه عاديه يعني حتى مثلا احنا ما جزء عشان كنا نتكلم قبل شويه الموضوع بتاع اصل بتاع وانيكا العمل بارد يعني الناس في عطش الناس عاوزين حاجه كويس ناس اقل حاجه بتسد يعملوا الناس كلهم يعني متعاملين الناس كلهم مبسوطين فانا كنت اجلس الانسان انا اقول اذا كان هو عمل الحاجه ده وهو خارج الحكومه بشكل الحسن الحسن له كان بيكون كيف هو كان في السلطه كان عامل
انا بتكلم في موضوع بتاع منتال هيلث
فانا قاعد اتكلم في انه احنا مواطنين يا ما جزء بتكلم عندنا مشكله نفسيه كبير وجزء من المشكله ده في مشكله هو ينتهي الباب بتاع الباب مصنع فانا بقول شكرا للشباب الحدود في السودان دار خدمات اكثر في اطار بتاع المرض النفسي شكرا لك.
شكرا لمشاركتك ما نطلع برا الموضوع. نرفع اخر مكالمه قبل ما نمشي لفاصل ومنه حنمشي للفقره الاخير. راديو. هلو راديو.
الشركات.
اوكي تفضل.
وانا اللي شارك في الموضوع ده طبعا.
نعم.
في البرنامج بتاع الساعة طبعا الاسم الكارت الاصل في الجنوب هنا يعني بدي للطموحات ذاته انه الناس تقدر تعيش بصحة جيد زي ما الانسان بيعيش بصحة جيد. فالحاجة الاصل الحالة الاقتصادية الاصل في الجنوب يعني انحارت يعني ذكر ما في اقتصاد كده تمام في جنوب السودان وما في إصلاحية ذات يعني اقتصاد الناس تقدر تعمل ضوابط بتاع الاقتصاد. والشعب الجنوب بكور قال انه حكومة ما قادر حكومة ذاته اذا هم ينظروا حكومة ده ما قادر ذاته يخدم او يعمل حاجة للشعب بتاع جنوب السودان مثلا يعني. فمن المفترض الشعب الجنوبي يعين البرنامج ده لأن الحكومة ده أساسا إنه فاشل ما في ولا حاجة فيه. الجرموز إنه النازل تقدر
نعم واصل. معليش فقدناك في الخط وده آخر متصل في الفقرة ده. نمشي لفاصل.
راديو لأخبار الموزون اللي تكون بيتمر فوقه من كل جنوب السودان ومن برا جنوب السودان. أسمع تكون لأي راديو أنا تكون في جنوب السودان.
مرحبا بك مرة تاني. نمشي للفقرة الأخير لبرنامجنا الليلة. بينما حث السفير البابوي لدى جنوب السودان الشعب في البلاد على تبني عقلية جديدة ما بترى في السلاح حلا للخلافات أو الوسيلة الوحيدة لكسب النفوس أو الحصول على حصة من ثروات بتاع البلاد. وفي كلمته أمام الأساقفة الكاثوليك المجتمعين حاليا في ملكال أكد سفير الفاتيكان المطران باتريك سيموس تضامن الكنيسة مع المجتمعات اللي بتعاني من الصراعات والمصاعب في ولاية أعالي النيل. نسمع لرسالة بتاعه اللي هو سفير بتاع الفاتيكان.
Dear fathers and dear guests, it's of course a great pleasure to be with you again for this plenary assembly of the Sudan and South Sudan Catholic Bishops' Conference. I'm particularly pleased that it was decided to hold this session in Malakal, and even if that decision was made before the current deterioration in the political and social situation here in Upper Nile State, the presence of the Catholic bishops here as a body is a strong sign of solidarity with this local church, so sorely tested in the last few months and indeed in the preceding years. Our presence here speaks of the closeness of the church to her children, even in times of distress and of danger. I thank Bishop Stephen Nyodo for hosting us so well here in Malakal. We all pray earnestly for a peaceful resolution of the conflicts that still, alas, continue to cause death and displacement here in Upper Nile State and in other parts of the country. We must continue to work for peace and for the silencing of the weapons of war in our country. We must find a way out of the cycle of violence that leaves too many of our people frightened and separated from their homes and their land. There is a need to form a new habit of mind that does not see the gun as a solution to disagreement or as the only means of obtaining influence or a share of the country's riches. In fact, this is a grave problem, it seems to me, among us, the perception that one must take up arms in order to get a share of the cake. While South Sudan witnesses a deterioration in the security situation, our brothers in the north are still held hostage, alas, in a cruel and protracted conflict. In a special way, I welcome the bishops from Sudan, who know very well the reality of ministering in extremely trying and dangerous circumstances. I was very grateful to have had the opportunity to travel to the Archdiocese of Khartoum for 10 days in September, to visit the Catholic communities in Atbara and Omdurman, in Khartoum and in Port Sudan, and to speak a word of consolation and closeness on behalf of Pope Leo XIV. The visit also offered an insight into the extraordinary challenges facing our brothers in Sudan and the urgent need to pray for a peaceful solution to that cruel war. We echo the words of Pope Leo on the 2nd of November when he prayed for the victims of the horrible violence in El Fasher urging the creation of humanitarian corridors and calling for a ceasefire. For that too we urgently pray, while we reaffirm our solidarity with the Archdiocese of Khartoum and the Diocese of El Obeid. This is the sobering context in which we minister, and indeed in which we preach the Word of God, a word, after all, of peace and reconciliation. But we remain preachers of God's Word in season and out, as St. Paul says. And in the present season in our countries, that preaching of the Gospel is ever necessary and ever powerful. In this context, a remark of St. John Henry Newman, whom Pope Leo declared a Doctor of the Church on the 1st of November, comes to mind. His writings in prose and in verse, his sermons, his devotions, and his life story are a rich source of inspiration and guidance. But the remark to which I want to come is made in a series of essays entitled Difficulties Felt by Anglicans in Catholic Teaching. And he has this rather instructive passage, I think relevant for us bishops. He writes, "Go through the annals of church history century after century, and say, was there ever a time when her bishops, and notably the Bishop of Rome, were slow to give their testimony in behalf of the moral and revealed law, and to suffer for their obedience to it? Ever a time when they forgot that they had a message to deliver to the world, not the task merely of administering spiritual consolation, or of making the sick bed easy, or of training up good members of society, but specially and directly a definite message to high and low from the world's Maker, whether men would hear it or whether they would forbear. Whether men would hear it. One often has the sentiment in our countries that men refuse to hear. Nonetheless, our task as bishops is to continue to give our testimony in behalf of the moral and revealed law. This message that we have to deliver to the world is God's own revelation of Himself. In its essentials, it is unchanged and unchanging, and it offers man the only true recipe for happiness in this life and in the next. Each Sunday at our Mass we witness to the essentially unchanging nature of God's revelation when we recite the Nicene Creed, which was formulated now 1,700 years ago at the First Council of Nicaea in 325. Later this month, Pope Leo will make his first international visit to Turkey. Now, why to Turkey? It is precisely to mark the anniversary at Iznik, which is the modern equivalent of Nicaea. He is going to mark the anniversary of the Council of Nicaea in 325 and of that creed that we recite each Sunday at Mass. The faith pronounced by the Fathers at that council 1700 years ago is still pronounced by us each week, and it is still true. It is this faith that we preach in season and out. The faith of Christ made man, Christ who took on our human flesh in order to restore it, who became poor that we might become rich. This last phrase features at the center of another first for Pope Leo, his first apostolic exhortation, De Lexite, given at Rome on the 4th of October, which is the feast of St. Francis of Assisi. The exhortation was prepared in part during the final months of the pontificate of Pope Francis and has been embraced and completed by Pope Leo. It is addressed to all Christians on the love of the poor, and this is a theme which must be rather close to our hearts as pastors and may offer an occasion for us to reflect on the situation in our respective countries from the perspective of the poor. The Holy Father bases his discussion firmly on the words of Scripture. He recalls that powerful word from the book of Exodus, where the Lord addresses Moses about his people. The Lord says, "I have heard their cry on account of their taskmasters. Indeed, I know their sufferings, and I have come to deliver them." There is a promise of the mystery of Christ's incarnation in this divine declaration. God does hear the cry of the oppressed. Indeed, He sent His Son into the world as a response. Pope Leo goes on to mention another cry referred to in the letter of St. James. The wages of the labourers who mowed your fields, which you kept back by fraud, cry out, and the cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord of hosts. The Pope's discussion of poverty is placed in the context of justice, for poverty is hardly an accidental condition, nor must we think of it as natural. It is often the result of inequalities and, alas, of greed. Pope Leo remarks, "A concrete commitment to the poor must also be accompanied by a change in mentality that can have an impact at the cultural level. In fact, the illusion of happiness derived from a comfortable life pushes many people towards a vision of life centered on the accumulation of wealth and social success at all costs, even at the expense of others, and by taking advantage of unjust social ideals and political economic systems that favor the strongest." The Pope concludes this remark, "Thus, in a world where the poor are increasingly numerous, we paradoxically see the growth of a wealthy elite, living in a bubble of comfort and luxury, almost in another world compared to ordinary people." End of quote. Does this final sentence, taken from Dilexite number 11, does this final sentence describe the situation in our own country? And might the existence and acceptance of such blatant inequality seep into the Church too, and influence our own mentality? The Church in this context, however, must make a different choice and take a different path. The Pope reminds us, and I quote, "God has a special place in his heart for those who are discriminated against and oppressed, and he asks us, his Church, to make a decisive and radical choice in favour of the weakest." A long and fascinating chapter of the exhortation is dedicated to recalling the innumerable moments that have constantly erupted in the Church's life in favour of the poor and the excluded. The Pope recalls, for example, the preaching of the Fathers of the Church in defence of the poor. He mentions Augustine in particular, of course, who wishes his congregants to see Christ in the poor. Pope Leo then recalls the monastic movement inspired by St. Benedict, that for centuries cared for the poor and the sick, always welcoming the stranger. He recalls too the mendicant orders founded in the Middle Ages, such as the Franciscans, who willingly embraced poverty in imitation of Christ, and who saw care of the poor as an essential part of their vocation. He mentions the later religious families of the 16th and 17th centuries, dedicated to educating in particular the children of the poor. In the subsequent chapter, he brings these reflections into the present age, recalling the commitment of the Church to migrants and the fruits of the Church's contemporary social teaching, beginning from Leo XIII's strong defence of the worker and his rights in Rerum Novarum. Indeed, there is much for us to reflect upon in this first apostolic exhortation of Pope Leo XIV. Perhaps I will just summarize it with three phrases that struck me as I was reading it, which we might take as our takeaways from this brief review of the document. One is this from Dilexite number 52. "When the Church kneels beside a leper, a malnourished child, or an anonymous dying person, she fulfills her deepest vocation, to love the Lord where he is most disfigured." The second I take from Dilexite number 58. "The Church is fully the bride of the Lord only when she is also the sister of the poor." And finally, a note particularly for us who are pastors, taken from Dilexite number 114. "In reality, the worst discrimination which the poor suffer is the lack of spiritual care. Our preferential option for the poor must mainly translate into a privileged and preferential religious care."
Right, and we had there from the Apostolic Nuncio to South Sudan, or the ambassador of Vatican, that is Patrick Simmers, was speaking or addressing bishops of the Catholic Church from both Sudan and South Sudan in Malakal during the ongoing conference there. And with that, we've come to the end of the Dawn edition for today. Join us again tomorrow at the same time to get the latest on what's happening in South Sudan and beyond the borders. Up next, news in Arabic with Michael Daniel. On behalf of the Dawn team, Geoffrey Amanya, Darlington Moses, and producer Dico DeAndre, this has been Emmanuel Joseph Akile. Have a good day. Let's meet again tomorrow.